Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Yags, and I think it's time that we finally talked about the Boston Celtics. I cannot delay this conversation any longer with you guys. So, Boston is currently sitting at 15-9 with recent wins over the Cleveland Cavaliers, the New York Knicks, the Magic, the Detroit Pistons, and last night over the Toronto Raptors. Basically, the best teams in the Eastern Conference so far. And they are doing this all without their franchise superstar player in Jayson Tatum. They are not supposed to look this good. And most of this has come behind some of the best and most mature basketball of Jaylen Brown's career. They've built an offensive identity on the fly, real chemistry, and they've found rotation guys that could barely get on the floor last year. So one of the biggest questions coming into the season was, can Jaylen Brown carry a team without Jayson Tatum? We know that he's done this before, in short stints, but has he done it just completely without Jayson Tatum? Not as a co-star, but actually being, the main guy, the alpha male of the Boston Celtics. And so far, with Jaylen Brown on the floor, they're a plus 121.5 per 100 possessions. And when he sits, that drops way down to 109.7. That's a 12-point swing. That's the type of stuff that you see on Jokic level kind of guys, that if they're just the main engine and everything goes through them, that's what we're seeing from Jaylen Brown right now. Over his last couple of games, again, wins over the Cavs, the Knicks, Orlando, Detroit, Toronto, the best teams in the East. He's averaging 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, 6.7 assists, and 2.5 stocks on 58% true shooting, while taking the opponent's best defender every single night. I mean, that's not stepping up. That's star production on demand every single night as a number one option. And I think one of the best things that Jaylen Brown has done this year is shoot the mid-range, all right? The mid-range has become basically his signature weapon throughout this whole year. And I feel like he's like on par with SGA, Kevin Durant's of the world with that mid-range. And that's the type of shot that you need in your arsenal, because that's like a bucket getter, right? When you don't have any spacing, when you have the shot clock coming down to the end, you can just get to your spot and shoot the mid-range and it'll go down if you're confident. And that's what Jaylen Brown has done the whole year. I think another point I want to touch on for Jaylen Brown is his handle. Jaylen Brown gets dogged on all the time, forever, for not being a good ball handler, okay? I am the first one to admit it. I dog on him, everybody says that he doesn't have a left hand, whatever. But he's done a pretty decent job this year, although I know he's not the primary ball handler, but I could say he's the second. And when Jayson Tatum comes back, Jayson Tatum is generally the main ball handler for the Boston Celtics. But Jaylen Brown has really stepped it up. And I feel like he's just using his ball handling, at a more controlled pace, and he's just switching it up. And I feel like he feels so comfortable this year in a way that I haven't seen him feel like this in past years. I'd like to say that. And he's just using his speed and strength to get to the bucket or get to his spots without losing the ball, and just generating turnovers, which is something that I feel like Jaylen Brown has done a lot throughout his career. And when you think about it, when Jayson Tatum comes back and Jaylen Brown naturally slides into his normal secondary role, his 1B to Jayson Tatum's 1A, I feel like he's just going to be a smarter playmaker, a cleaner decision maker, and just feels like a better scorer overall, which is kind of insane because I can confidently say that he is the second best option in the sport when Jayson Tatum comes back. So, props to Brown. All right, he's done a fantastic job. I know the beginning of the year was a little rough. I was actually, thinking that the Boston Celtics were going to draft inside the top 3. That was one of my main predictions. I did not think that the Boston Celtics would be doing this well. At the beginning of the year, I thought that Darren Peterson or AJ DeBonta would be a Celtic for sure, because they looked really, really bad. And they turned it up a notch over the past couple of games, beating very, very good teams in the Eastern Conference. And I think most of that slow start for the Celtics were the fact that Derek White and Payton Pritchard, they were horrendous to start the season. Okay, Derek White was shooting 28% from 3 to start the year. Payton Pritchard was shooting at 26%. So your second and third scoring options were basically combining for less than 30 points. And both of them were under 50% shooting. They weren't just cold. They could not do absolutely anything. And over the past couple of games, it feels like it's a completely different team. So you have Payton Pritchard shooting nearly 45% from 3 on outrageous volume, right? 9.3 attempts per game. And you have Derek White shooting a little bit over 40% on 7 attempts. And just restoring the whole spacing for the Boston Celtics, which we know is something that they like to do, shoot threes at high volume, at high percentages. But with Derek White, even though he's struggling offensively, he always brings that defensive side of the ball that is always so good on him. So he's really good at timing rotation. He's good on ball. He just positions himself well on the defensive side of the ball. And I think a big turnaround point for him was that Pistons game where he was looking really bad, 5 points at halftime. Then he finished the game with 27 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 stocks, 6 from 11 from 3. That was a major game for Derek White, in my opinion. And then when we go to Payton Pritchard, his main thing is the creation and the spacing. I thought that Payton Pritchard would be the main guy handling the ball coming into this season, especially with Jrue Holiday, going to the Trailblazers. But Payton Pritchard against the Cavs, to me, the Cavs are still the best team in the Eastern Conference, all right? Against the Cavs, they had no Derek White, and Payton Pritchard, he balled out. 42 points. That's a career high for him. 68% field goal percentage, 6 of 11 from 3 as well. And he closed against a legit playoff team. Like I said, to me, the best team in the Eastern Conference. And with Pritchard on the floor, Boston's a plus 6.5 per 100 just because of the way he can create off the dribble. And when he's hot, he just bombs high volume threes at a high percentage. And he can keep the ball moving. So Derek White and Payton Pritchard, they were never supposed to be stars. And Derek White, you can say that he may be a star. Payton Pritchard, 6th man of the year last year. But he's just reliable. He's efficient. They're steady guys that what they're going to give you. And they could possibly have these crazy games where they just get hot and they score a lot of points. And I think that's exactly what they're delivering right now, over this 7-game stretch the Boston Celtics have had, which keeps the lane wide open. It brings back the spacing. And at the end of the day, you can have Jaylen Brown, get to the cup or drive and kick for an easy open 3. And then we have some surprise names this year of guys that could barely get on the floor last year, developmental players showing up big when it matters. So you have Jordan Walsh, all right? The stat line aren't, phenomenal. 7 points, a couple assists, some rebounds, but he's a guy that he does everything. He does the gritty stuff that you need to win basketball games. And when Jordan Walsh is on the floor, Boston's is a plus 10.5 per 100. And he's kind of that guy that reminds me a lot of, Josh. He gives me Josh Hart vibes because he defends, he rebounds, cuts to the basket. He just, like I said, does winning basketball things. TJ McConnell's another guy that comes in mind. A guy that just comes off the bench, super professional, does what he needs to do to win a basketball game. So Jordan Walsh has been a pleasant surprise this year for me. And then Neemias Queta, he's been outstanding. The Boston Celtics have always had a problem with their front court. That's not a surprise to anybody. You had, KP is gone. He's in Atlanta. Lou Cornette, he's gone as well. He's with the Spurs. And I really thought that the Celtics would get killed in the paint. And Neemias Queta has been a very good surprise. With him on the floor, the Boston Celtics are a plus 12 basically net, right? An offensive rating of 118.5 with him. And I think where he mainly shows up is on the defensive side of the ball, where without him, the defensive rating for the Boston Celtics is 124.2, and then with him, it's 106.6. That might be one of the biggest swings of the NBA if we're talking about any player, okay? That's an 18-point defensive swing. That is crazy. That's like Victor Wembanyama-esque. I'm not saying, he's as good as Victor. Of course he isn't, but just the impact he has on that team when he's on the floor. So, this is the kind of stuff that you need that can make a big difference between a team just being horrible without their star player or keeping them afloat enough for when that star player comes back so they can make a final push. And as we're talking about star players, Jayson Tatum, about his comeback. We've seen a bunch of stuff. We've seen him dunk, this crazy miraculous recovery that he's had. I think that he's going to push to come back around February, maybe March, maybe not at all. It depends. The Boston Celtics stay hot and they're actually competing. He has a very serious injury that, that Achilles tear. That is not something that you mess around and you come back too early. That, if he re-tears that for some odd reason, if he comes back too early, and you can't expect Jayson Tatum to come back, at that all NBA form that he was. But if he comes back, just a shell of himself, like 50%, and just gradually works up, I think that's going to make a big difference for the Celtics. Depending where they're at, I personally wouldn't even bring him back. If they're not competing, if they're at like the play-in, I wouldn't bring him back. Personally, I would just let him sit and rest and work throughout the whole offseason for next year. But I think it's really going to depend. As of now, I think the Boston Celtics could win maybe 45-ish games with Tatum coming back, maybe 50. If not, if they're below 500, let's say 5-10 games, I would literally not even bring him back. to be honest. But I think that's also going to make Brad Stevens make a big decision, right? So near February, I feel like Brad Stevens is in a place where he might make a big move if they can compete, or maybe he'll just make just smaller, more calculated moves. I'm curious to see, 'cause Brad Stevens, he's a magician, all right? He always does something miraculous. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with this Boston Celtics team. I am very impressed with them at the moment. I feel like the Eastern Conference is kind of muddy at the moment. I thought the Knicks would be better at this point of the season. I thought the Cavs would be better at this point in the season. The Detroit Pistons have been a very pleasant surprise. I really like that Detroit Pistons team. Orlando started off really slow. They're really hot. The Bucks started out really hot, are now doing pretty bad. I actually thought the Bucks would end up below an 8th seed. But yeah, guys, the Boston Celtics, they are doing really well. They should not be this good, all right? A 15-9 team without their best player. What is going to happen when he comes back? Let me know in the comments. Where do you guys think the Boston Celtics are going to finish? Are they a playoff team? Are they a play-in team? Do you guys think, this is just going to happen for a couple of games? Are they going to go back down to, to that start of the season? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed the content, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, trying to hit those 1,000 subscribers, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.